Under the harsh fluorescent glow of the military tribunal hall, the insult struck like a bullet. They called her washed up, a relic, someone who clung to stories of a past no one believed mattered anymore. Laughter, low and sharp, rippled through the gathered officers. The words carried cruelty meant to crush, a dismissal designed to erase years of sacrifice in one mocking breath. At that instant, every eye turned toward her, expecting her to break, to argue, to plead her relevance. But she did not. She stood in silence, shoulders squared, her uniform a little frayed at the edges, her hair threaded with the silver of long battles endured. And it was then, as the room leaned into its collective disdain, that the general's gaze shifted. He froze, the air thickening with an almost tangible stillness, as his eyes fell upon the mark inked into the skin of her arm, half hidden, half revealed, a classified emblem that most believed had been erased from history. She did not flinch beneath the stares. Her silence was not weakness. It was defiance forged from years of knowing that true strength requires no explanation. The younger soldiers who had joined too late to understand saw only a faded veteran, but the general, whose blood had once been spilled in the same shadowed war she had fought, recognized something few alive still carried. The emblem was not merely a tattoo. It was a covenant, earned in fire and blood, bound to missions that had never been spoken of in open halls. And now it surfaced in this sterile courtroom, exposing truths that silence alone had guarded. Long before this moment, she had carried weight enough to break anyone else. The acrid stench of burning oil still haunted her nostrils when night fell. The sound of helicopters thundering overhead often rattled her from shallow sleep. She remembered the chill of desert nights where the stars stretched endlessly, and the faces of comrades lost seemed etched into constellations. She had been there when orders were muddled, when politics played with human lives, when brothers and sisters bled out in dust, and no one came to save them. Yet she had stayed, patching wounds with trembling hands, carrying the dying across hostile ground, and whispering promises she had no power to keep. Her body bore scars, but it was the silence of empty bunks and folded flags that had carved the deepest wounds. And when the wars ended, when medals were pinned on chests and cameras captured triumph, she had slipped into obscurity. No ceremony marked her departure. Civilians saw only another veteran fading into the crowd, worn out by burdens invisible to those who had never tasted war. Employers dismissed her skills. Neighbors called her distant. Even her fellow soldiers, younger and unscarred, whispered that she had been too long away, that she belonged to another time. Washed up, that was the name they gave her, as though years of survival had spoiled her worth. And she let them call her so, carrying silence like a shield. Now, in this tribunal, the conflict reignited. She had been called to testify on decisions made long ago, choices that cost lives. The officers gathered hungered for a scapegoat, someone to absorb the blame so the machinery of rank could keep turning. They thought her silence would make her easy prey. She heard them question her relevance, her memory, her judgment. Their words filled the chamber like smoke, suffocating and sharp. Yet still, she stood unmoved, her stillness unsettling to those who mistook it for defeat. It was then that the emblem revealed itself, not through boast or explanation, but through the shifting of her sleeve. A simple motion, and history surfaced in black ink. Wings unfurled, a symbol forbidden, tied to missions buried under layers of classification. The general's eyes widened, not in anger, but in recognition. Memories surged within him. Memories of nights where soldiers fought not for glory, but to keep shadows from consuming nations. He knew what the emblem meant. He knew what she had carried, what she had endured, and what it cost her to remain silent even now. The room, however, remained blind. Officers continued their jeers. The silence between her and the general grew thick, heavy with unspoken truth. In her stillness was a power they could not name, but he could. He saw how she bore the burden not for herself but for those who could no longer speak. In that moment, the weight of the tribunal shifted. Authority clashed against dignity, rules against humanity. And though no words passed her lips, her presence began to unravel the falsehoods they had woven around her. The disrespect escalated. One officer sneered, asking if the emblem was some drunken mistake, inked by desperation. Another laughed, calling it counterfeit. She did not answer. Her silence was not absence, but resistance. For in her silence lay the graves of comrades, the faces of those who had died never recognized, and the truth that those who had mocked her could never understand. The general's hand twitched as though restraining himself, torn between duty and the surge of respect rising in his chest. The tension coiled tighter. Bystanders shifted uncomfortably, aware of the cruelty but unwilling to intervene. The air smelled of fear, not hers but theirs. The fear of confronting their own smallness in the presence of someone who needed no validation. And then, with a voice low but steady, the general finally broke the silence. He did not address her but the hall. He named the emblem. He named the mission. He revealed the truth buried under decades of secrecy, words falling like stones into water, rippling through the room. Those who had mocked her fell into silence, their faces paling as they realized what they had stood against. The shift was immediate, irreversible. She did not smile, did not weep, did not move. But the power of her silence became undeniable. The general's voice trembled when he spoke of the sacrifices she had endured, the lives she had saved, the missions no one else would ever claim. And then he turned to her, eyes filled with the weight of shared memory, and said words that would echo beyond the hall. That honor does not fade, that scars are proof of survival, and that those who carry silence carry the heaviest truths of all. The crowd stood then, not by command but by compulsion. One by one the officers rose, the weight of shame heavy upon them. They had seen a washed-up soldier. Now they saw a guardian of a forgotten covenant, a living reminder that dignity does not require permission. She remained motionless, but in her stillness was victory, unshakable and profound. No gavel declared her vindicated. No official decree cleared her name. But the silence of the room, filled with the sound of standing respect, was louder than any verdict. Her story lingered after the tribunal ended. Soldiers whispered it in barracks. Civilians shared it across communities. And her image, quiet, resolute, scarred yet unbroken, became a symbol far greater than she had ever sought. They repeated her silent lesson in their own words. That true honor does not demand recognition, that sacrifice speaks without sound, and that those who endure carry the weight of nations even when no one remembers. And so the reflection remains. Respect is not a gift to be given at whim. It is a debt owed to those who have walked through fire in silence. Strength is not in words shouted, but in burdens borne quietly. Some battles are unseen, some victories uncelebrated, but their worth does not diminish. To those listening now, take a moment to remember the silent heroes who walk among you, whose scars are their medals, whose silence is their strength. Share where you hear this story, share what it stirs within you, and let it stand as a reminder that the washed up are often the unrecognized guardians of history.